Welcome to Season Liberally. My name is Cecil. Today we are going to be making some holiday spreads. We know that this year is going to be a little weird for a lot of people. They're not going to be able to travel like they normally do. I know I normally go out on New Year's Eve every year with friends, and I almost always go out on Christmas Eve. And so there's going to be a lot of time that I'm going to be spending at home this holiday season. And I suspect a lot of people out there are going to be doing the same. But that doesn't mean we have to deprive ourselves. We can have a lot of fun and we can make a lot of great stuff. I just posted another video on pork rillettes. And so I wanted to make something that was vegetarian so that people who don't like pork or who don't really want to eat a lot of meat can also have some really great holiday spreads and some interesting stuff to put on breads and crackers. They really accent a charcuterie tray. So I wanted to make a couple of vegan recipes, and I'm also going to make a vegetarian recipe that's a cheese-based dip. One of the vegan recipes I'm going to make is actually you can make it with dairy if you like, and I'll give you the recipe to use if you wanted to make it with dairy. But I'm going to make a non-dairy version of it to show you how that's done. So we have three spreads that we want to start out with. The first one we're going to start out with is vegan. This is called Romesco. Romesco is from Spain, and it is a wonderful dip made with a little bit of tomato, a little bit of toasted almond, and roasted red peppers. So now you can go and buy roasted red peppers. They come in a jar at the supermarket, and they're normally packed in water. You'll pull them out, and they're normally all cleaned already. But if you don't have access to a jar of roasted red peppers at your supermarket, or you don't want to buy them, you can make them yourself. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to show you how to make roasted red peppers first before we start anything else. These are the first thing you're going to want to do if you're making the Romesco because they take a little bit of time. So we're going to broil these peppers. If you had a gas burner, I don't have gas in my condo. If you had a gas burner, you could literally just take a pair of tongs, set these, crank your fan on as high as it'll go, because it's going to get real smoky if you don't. And then you could just literally set these right on the burner of your stove, and they will char and burn and blacken. And then you would just follow the procedure I'm going to show you later once they come out of the broiler blackened. But I'm going to actually use my broiler for this today. And when you use a broiler, you're going to want to use a little bit of oil. So I'm going to add a little of extra virgin olive oil to these. So I'm not going to put a ton on here, but I am going to make sure that the whole surface is coated with oil. And now you can, if you like, you can cut these ahead of time and de-seed them. But I actually find that the seeds, as they cook, flavor the pepper really well. So I normally keep the seeds in, and then I'll clean them after they're done. So once the peppers are covered with oil, we're just going to put them directly into our broiler. And you're gonna want to watch these. I normally cook them for about 5 minutes or so each side, and give them a turn with a pair of tongs. Make sure they're nice and black before I turn them the other side. So we're gonna put those in now. So now I pre-toasted my almonds, but you're gonna want to get in an oven up to about 350 degrees convection. 375 conventional. Drop your slivered almonds. This is a whole cup of slivered almonds. You drop your cup of slivered almonds onto a sheet tray and just cook it for about 5 to 7 minutes. Give it a shake about halfway through to make sure it's not burning. But you want to toast your almonds before you actually make this. That's the second thing you're going to want to do. You're going to want to make sure that those are both done and cool before we continue on with the recipe. So when your peppers come out of the oven, they've been cooking, mine have been cooking for quite some time here, and they're ready to come out. But one of the things we gotta do is we've kind of got to steam them a little bit. It helps get the skin off, and it also helps continually cook the pepper all the way through. So we're gonna lay a piece of, we have a press and seal here, but you could use cling wrap or aluminum foil, or you could even find like a tight-fitting glass dish with a tight-fitting lid, and you could use that as well. As long as we can seal these peppers off and still leave a little bit of space around them so that there's enough steam that can the steam can come off of them, that'll work fine. So I'm gonna get the peppers out right now, and I'm gonna place them into this bag and show you how it's done. So you can see the pepper is nice and charred. It's been cooking for a while. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna loosely wrap it in this cling wrap, and then I'm just gonna crunch the ends up so that there's enough space in there for this pepper to steam itself. And then I'm just gonna set it on my counter and wait until it cools before I even touch it. So that's all you need to do with this. But you gotta make sure that there's enough space in there so that enough steam can come off of these so that it'll actually help remove the skin. So I'm just making like a little bag here. Press and seal is pretty easy for this. Cling wrap might be a little different. You might have to spin it a little bit. Foil, the same thing. And you can also put these in, like I said, a glass jar. So I'm just gonna let these sit on the counter for a little while, probably about 15 minutes or so, and then they should, the skin and the seeds and stuff should come right off of it. So my peppers have had a chance to cool a little bit. They're still in their little bags that I created with this press and seal. I'm going to take them out of there. They're chilled now, so they don't need to be. I didn't want to mess with these when they were nice and hot. One thing I do want to do though is I do want to save this juice that's in here. This juice is really, really delicious, and so any bit that I can save, I'm going to save. It's got a lot of flavor to it, and the final we're going to put all of this pepper into the Romesco sauce, and we want to conserve as much of that as we can. So now when you have these peppers, you can see that they're pretty flimsy at this point. What you want to do is you want to pull the stems off and throw those into a refuse bowl, and then just break the peppers open, okay? And as you can see, this one's full of juice. I'm just gonna pour some of that juice in there. Nice, beautiful water that's in there, and it's gonna be delicious. Now, carefully, I want to try to get as much of the seeds out as I can. Now, the seeds do a really great job of flavoring it, but we do not want to have seeds in our final dish, so we're going to take them all out as much as we can. And I'm actually going to pull I'm going to turn these over in a second. I'm going to try to get as much off as I can here. And you can use a utensil if it's easier. I find my hands are pretty easy to get this off of here. They normally fall off pretty easily if I use my hands. But you can use a knife or something to scrape it. Maybe a butter knife would work nice here too. I'm just pulling off the seeds as much as I can. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to core it. And it helps if you can sort of pull the seeds out with the core, like I'm doing here, if you can see. A lot of the seeds came out with that core. I'm going to pour this juice off into here. So I got a lot of the seeds off. Now I'm just going to rub on the edge of this pepper. I'm just going to rub the pepper and pull the skin off. The charred skin is going to come right off of it. I don't want that charred skin because it's going to be it's not going to break down when I do the food processing. So it's not going to break down really well. And I definitely don't want to have it in the final dish. So I'm trying to pull as much of it off as I can. You do not want to run these under water. There's a lot of flavor in these, and that flavor is intensified as they broil. And so what you don't want to do is put them under water and run water over these, because you're going to wash all of that wonderful flavor away. So now there's a couple of seeds in here that came out with the pepper. A few is not a big deal. You know, you're going to try to get off as many as you can, but if there's a few seeds in here, it's not a huge deal. They probably will pulverize, but you don't want a ton of them in there because they can get bitter if there's a lot of seeds in there. All right. 2 roasted red peppers, a little bit of reserve juice. That's going to be perfect. So once I have my peppers ready, I want to get the rest of my mise en place ready. I had already toasted the almonds. This is a cup of almonds. This is 4 tablespoons of chopped parsley, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, a half a cup of tomato puree, and I have 2 garlic cloves that I have roughly chopped, and then I have 4 tablespoons of sherry vinegar and 1 cup of olive oil. So a lot of this can be added initially, but what we want to do is we want to try to create an emulsion if we can with the olive oil. So we're going to reserve that until the end. We're going to put our nuts in the bottom because we want to make sure that they're chopped up and fine. So we want to put those in the bottom with the peppers. The garlic, because again, we want this to be as fine as possible. And our parsley. So now I'm going to pulse this a few times to try to break it apart. So you can see it's starting to break apart here. We're going to add the other ingredients to this, the vinegar. But I'm also going to add the tomato puree, and I'm going to scrape the sides here. I'm going to sprinkle the paprika and the cayenne pepper in there. I'm going to add a little bit of salt to this now. I'm going to add about a teaspoon for now, and I might add a little more later, but I want to make sure that there's some salt in there now. So here we go. I'm going to turn it on to really get it going here. Now, I don't want this to be completely smooth. I still want to have a little bit of chunk in there. You want to see a little bit of chunk in there. So don't run it forever, because it'll eventually just turn into a paste, and you don't want it to be a paste. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start up my food processor, and then I'm just going to pour this oil in slowly, and then it's going to be finished. And if you like yours a little more chunky than this is relatively chunky. There's still some pieces of almond in here, which is perfect. But if you want yours a little more chunky than this, you could just spin it a few times, and then you can fold the rest of the ingredients in. So now this is going to need a little more salt. So the Romesco can be served room temperature, or a little chilled if you like. Remember that the flavors will be a little muted the colder it is. I'm going to give it a try with a little piece of bread here and then a little piece of cracker. Look at how that covers, though. It's almost like a vinaigrette, right? So it's got an emulsion like a vinaigrette because of that oil. And so if it starts to break again, you could just whisk it and it'll start to come back together. But it's got this really beautiful sheen to it. So there's some really wonderful notes in there. There's the pepper in there. There's quite a bit of pepper, which is good. It's got a little bit of back of the throat heat. There's a really wonderful nutty roasted flavor because of all those almonds that are in there. And then, of course, the roasted red pepper comes through. Really powerful roasted red pepper flavor with a little tiny bit of acidity from the tomato. It's a really great dip. And this is 100% vegan. The best part about this is 100% vegan. And so you can have people over that, if they don't eat dairy, they don't eat meat, this is going to be a perfect thing for you to serve for them. This turned out really, really good. And play with it a little bit. If you want it to be a little more sour, you can add a little more vinegar to it. If you want it to have a little more creamy flavor, you can add a little more oil. The good thing is that this is just a baseline, so you could play with it as much as you like. So for this recipe here, I don't have a vegan alternative. This is a cheese sauce. Fromage Fort is what it's called. And so it's essentially cheese with a little bit of wine and some garlic. And really the best part about this recipe is that it's, again, one of those guideline recipes. Once you know the ratios, you could pretty much substitute what you want in it. So right now what I have is I have a little bit of shredded Parmesan. I have shredded Gruyere cheese, and I have a little bit of shredded cheddar. Now, if it's a softer cheese, you don't actually technically have to shred it, but I had it shredded already. And so I just basically took it out of the bags that I had already set up. And so the Parmesan I would almost certainly shred before I put it in here, because if not, it's just gonna bang around inside of your food processor and it's gonna make a lot of noise. But any soft cheese, it doesn't matter. And then I cut this Munster up into strips. You can use soft and hard cheeses in this in whatever ratio you want. And that's what's so great about this recipe, is that it's pretty much whatever you have on hand, you can turn into a really wonderful cheese spread. And so that's what we're gonna do right now. It's dead easy. We're just gonna put it in a food processor. I have a pretty strong food processor. I don't know of another way to make this other than with a food processor. I'm sure there's some old-timey gadgets that might work for this, but I would suggest you have a food processor to try this recipe. So we're gonna add the cheese into the bottom here, and I'm just gonna sprinkle it all around the edge. And as you can see, it's quite a bit of cheese. Now I have, because I don't wanna bite into a nice big chunk of garlic, I've already taken and minced this garlic. And so, I would suggest doing that too, just so that while it's mixing in here, you'll be sure that it's in small enough pieces so that you won't like choke on a big chunk of it. If you just throw it in here whole, it might not actually cut it completely. So that's why I did this. This is 2 cloves of garlic that I'm just gonna sprinkle in top of here. And that's gonna give the cheese a really nice bite. It's gonna have a nice edge to it that's really, really wonderful. So I'm gonna crack some pepper in here. This may get seasoned again as we taste it, but I'm just gonna crack a little in here to start out. And I'm gonna add just a touch of salt right now. I may salt later a little bit. Cheese normally has a pretty good salinity to it, so it normally doesn't need a ton of salt, but you're gonna want just a bit of salt because we are adding additives to this. I also have here a half a cup, this is a pound of cheese to a half a cup of dry white wine. That's what you want to use. You don't want anything sweet. Anything like a Riesling or something that's cloying or sweet is not going to taste good in here. It's going to sweeten this up, and that's not a great flavor. You want something that's got a nice sort of sour edge to it. So anything dry will work. I'm using a Chardonnay today. I'm just going to pour this directly in. So now, really, all you have to do is just turn this on and let it turn itself into a paste. So it's been going for 45 seconds, and I think that's kind of perfect. I'm gonna taste it just to see if it needs a little salt. The good thing is that it's still in here, right? And so if it does need just a touch of salt, I can taste it, see what it tastes like, and if it does need it, I can spin it while it's still in here and mix it and get it nice and incorporated in there. This is kind of impossible to overmix, so it's nice to try to make sure you get your flavors right now. So it's actually just a touch gritty right now, so I want to actually spin this for a little bit longer. And that's important. Make sure don't take it all the way out before you start messing with it. So I'm going to spin it a little bit longer. Okay, so it's starting to stick a little bit to the sides. I want to scrape down anything that's on the sides in here because I want to make sure it's all at the same consistency. And if it's not all at the same consistency, then you're going to wind up biting into it, and it's going to, while some parts of it may taste like cream cheese, the rest of it's going to be gritty, and you don't want that to happen. So I'm scraping it down on the sides. So as this spins, you'll get a chance to see that it sort of turns almost into like a frosting-like consistency. This is perfect how it is. I would not put any salt in here. Like I said, the salinity in cheeses is normally pretty good. If it does need a dash of salt, though, don't be afraid to throw a little bit in and then give it another spin. I think this is ready to go. So now to store this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the fridge. But if I want to serve this, and if I wanted to serve this right away, I would just leave this at room temperature, which is kind of what it's at right now. After it's spun around quite a bit, it's warm now. So I would just leave this at room temperature if I was going to serve it. So one of my favorite things to do with this is taking it to another level. So of course, like this Fromage Fort is wonderful, just spread on crackers or just on bread or whatever. You could dip vegetables into this, whatever you want to use. But one great use of this is to spread a little on some bread. And if you want, you could toast the bread ahead of time. But if you spread a little bit, and I like to spread a lot of bit, to be perfectly frank. And now I'm just going to throw this under the broiler for a couple minutes until I can see it start turning brown. This has been in the broiler for a couple minutes here, and it's really, really hot, so I'm not going to eat it right away. But this is essentially kind of like a Welsh rarebit. It's just this beautiful spread on top of this bread that's already been toasted a little bit, and it's really good. Nice crunch. Let's give it a try. Oh, man. So there's that, of course there's that garlic flavor, but the garlic flavor mellows out as you cook a little bit. So it's got this really wonderful, rich umami flavor. The cheese is caramelized a little bit too, so you get a little flavor of that. And then the cheese flavors really, as the temperature goes up, they intensify. And so what you wind up getting when you broil this is just this absolutely marvelous flavor and texture too. Because the bread, of course, is now crunchy, but then it's also sort of the cheese has sort of melted into all the sort of crannies that are in the, it's really, really good. That's a solid way to eat that. So I do want to try it just without anything, just to see how it tastes on a regular plain cracker. Little notes of the wine in there, which is really wonderful because it accents the cheese so nicely. And a lot of this cheese that I used was sharp, so it's got a really nice sharpness to it. Not only does the wine add to that, but the cheese itself is adding to it because there's a cheddar in there, there's a Gruyere, there's Parmesan. So there's a lot of sharpness in there that's really, really delicious. And that's the best part about this is that you can make it as sharp or as mild as you like. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is use the best quality that you can, right? This is a real simple dish. You're not really doing a lot with it. But the higher quality stuff that you can buy, the better your final outcome is going to be because you're not really doing a lot to this to mask any flavors. All the bad flavors will come out too if you're using cheese that is a little poorly processed and things like that. But this Fromage Fort is a wonderful recipe for you to use on a charcuterie board or if you're having people over. They're going to love this. And, just make a little bit of fresh bread yourself, and it's going to be delicious. So for this recipe, I am using all vegan ingredients. You can substitute 2 of these ingredients for dairy ingredients, and it's still vegetarian, it's just not vegan. But I'm going to show you the vegan recipe today. I'm using a cream cheese, but it's a cashew dairy alternative cream cheese, and it tastes crazily just like cream cheese. I mean, it's very, very similar. Just a tiniest touch grittier, but it's got a lot of almond milk in here, and then cashews, and then like I say, it's dairy free. It's really wonderful. I'm also using what I would call vegan heavy cream, which is essentially I whisk together 1/3 of a cup of olive oil and 2/3 of a cup of soy milk, unsweetened soy milk. And it gives it that richness that heavy cream does. And now this probably would not turn into you'd probably not be able to whip this and turn this into a topping, but it does add a lot of body and a lot of fat to this recipe. You could just replace these with heavy cream and cream cheese, and it would work just fine. So I'm going to use an 8-ounce container of this cream cheese. And I'm going to use a half a cup of this vegan heavy cream that I made. Into that, I'm going to just toss in 4 tablespoons of parsley, about a tablespoon of dill. This is fresh dill. About 3 tablespoons of the top part of your green onion. And then maybe about a tablespoon and a half of chive. I'm also going to add to that the zest of 1 lemon. I'm going to hit this with a little bit of salt to start out, just a touch. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper. And then now you would want to add, if you have it, crushed red pepper, or I'm using Aleppo pepper. And I'm just going to put a little shake of this in here, just a tiny bit to give it a little tiny bit of back heat. And now this just gets spun until it's finished. So now you don't want to spin this until it is absolutely water, because it won't look like there's pieces of green in here. It'll eventually just turn the whole thing green, because it'll mince every single bit of your vegetable matter that's in here. And so that's not going to be appetizing. We still want to have chunks of that in the dip when we're finished. So I'm going to give this a little taste here. If you told me that this was non-dairy, I don't know that I'd believe you. It has so much creaminess, so much richness. All the different types of herbs that we put in here really brighten it all up. And that lemon zest is wonderful in there, because it's just this very, very slight hint of that really citrusy flavor. But then there's this really underlying beautiful creaminess to this entire recipe. Really, really delicious. This is perfect if you were to spread this on bread or dip crackers in it. A wonderful spread to share with your vegan friends. So we have our 3 vegetarian dips here. We have the vegan cream cheese and herb. We have the vegan Romesco. All Romesco should be vegan. And we have our vegetarian Fort fromage. So each one of these is, I think, really wonderful. I will say that the Romesco is probably the best of the bunch. The Romesco day after is going to be absolutely amazing. The flavors get a chance to really meld and mellow after a day or so, and you're going to be really surprised. Another great use for this Romesco too is anything that is basically a very bland starch, you can toss in this Romesco sauce. So if you wanted to cook up some potatoes, maybe broil them in your oven, and you could toss the Romesco on that. You could fry up some tofu, toss that around your tofu. It is just an immense amount of flavor, and it's wonderful, and the flavor gets really complex as it sits. Each one of these is going to be a showstopper for you. Make some really nice bread. There's a recipe on this channel right now for bread that you could make that is just perfect for this. It's a great accompaniment. A little bit of these dips, a little bit of this bread. It's going to really ring in the new year for you and ring in the holiday season in a really special way. If you're interested in a meat dip, there is the Rillettes recipe that I just finished, also on the channel, that you can check out, which is essentially a pork pate. So I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoy these. I hope that you use these. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I hope that you ring in the new year and you have a safe and happy holiday. If you like this channel, if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe, and please share this with your friends. Anybody who you think might enjoy these videos would be great if you could share them to get the word out there. I very much appreciate it. I try to, if you want to comment, I try to comment and talk to everybody who has a question. So if you comment below, there's a chance, I will definitely read it, and there's a chance I'll respond. So please, I love to have conversations about food in the comment section, so feel free to comment. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you use these in the future.